We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Beis and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 72b. The Gemara is in the middle of discussing a double question. It's a question on the Shita of Rav Huna and also a contradiction within the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. In terms of the Shita of Rav Huna says that if a person sells a field and he retains for himself 2 trees in that field, so in that case, not only is he retaining for himself the trees, he's retaining for himself the land under the trees as well. Let's say the trees die, he'll be able to replant new trees in that place. And the Gemara initially had suggested that Rav Huna is talking according to all shitas, whether you hold like the Rabbanan that in general a person does not sell generously, or whether you hold like Rabbi Akiva that in general a person does sell generously. But in this case, where the seller is selling the field and retaining the trees for himself, even Rabbi Akiva would agree that he retains some of the land as well. The Gemara had suggested the reason for that is because the trees otherwise weaken the land, and so therefore the seller wants to retain some of the land for himself. That's what the Gemara initially suggested. But then the Gemara brought in the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. The Shita of Rabbi Shimon is in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says that when a person is makdish his field, he's only makdish the field, but other items, let's say that he wouldn't sell, let's say a person is selling the field, certain items are not included in that sale, like the pit and the cistern, etc. So those things also are not included in the hektish. That Rabbi Shimon does say. However, Rabbi Shimon says there is an exception, that one thing that is included within the hektish, even though it might not be included in the sale, are 2 kinds of trees. When you have important kinds of trees, like a developed carob tree, that's the Charv HaMurkav, or the Sadan HaShikma, which is the developed sycamore tree. So those trees actually are included within the hektish. And the Gemara said, why is it that those trees are included within the hektish? So the Gemara initially suggested that the reason is because Rabbi Shimon holds like Rabbi Akiva, that when the person is makdish, he's makdish generously, meaning to say that he's makdish all of the land, even if there's certain trees that he would be retaining for himself, but all of the land is hektish. And so therefore it would actually be problematic if he retains for himself the sycamore tree, or if he retains the carob tree for himself. It's problematic because now they're taking nutrients from the ground of hektish, because all of the ground has been made hektish. And so therefore that's why Rabbi Akiva said that the trees are also going to be considered hektish in that case. And so the Gemara had asked the question on Rav Huna from this case of Rabbi Shimon, because essentially it's an analogous kind of case. It's the same idea. The person is being makdish the field, and then we say that if he's being makdish the field and he's trying to retain the trees for himself, he does not retain the land underneath the trees. That seems the opposite of what Rav Huna was saying. Rav Huna was talking about a case of a sale where he does retain, not only does he keep the trees, but he retains the land under the trees as well. And so then the Gemara suggested we'll have to say that actually Rav Huna was not talking according to the Shita of Rabbi Shimon in a certain sense, because Rabbi Shimon follows Rabbi Akiva's Shita, that in general a person sells generously, and that's why Rabbi Shimon says over here also the person's makdish the land under the trees as well. Rabbi Shimon follows, he's in line with the Shita of Rabbi Akiva, and actually Rav Huna was talking according to the Rabbanan who say that a person in general does not sell generously. So that's what Rav Huna was saying, that in that situation the person is going to sell the field and he'll keep the trees and also the land under the trees for himself. That's what the Gemara suggested. But then the Gemara said that you can't really say that within Rabbi Shimon. You can't say that Rabbi Shimon is following the Shita, that when a person, that he's following the Shita of Rabbi Akiva, that a person sells, he sells generously. And again, that's why Rabbi Shimon is saying the land underneath the carob trees is also hektish. You can't really say that, because there's a Shita of Rabbi Shimon that's found in the Brisa. This is the Gemara brought in the previous Samad, and it's talking also about a situation of a person being makdish a field and makdish trees, and it's clear from the Brisa there are certain cases where the person is makdish just the tree, and that's why when he's going to redeem that tree from hektish, he has to pay the value of the tree, because when you're talking about land, there's a specific amount, a specific price of redemption that the Torah mentions, that only applies to land. But if it's only the tree and not the land together with the tree, then you're just going to redeem the tree at value. And so then it's clear from that Rabbi Shimon and that Brisa that on the contrary, when the person is makdish over here, the person actually is being makdish just the tree and not the land that goes along with the tree. It doesn't seem that the person is doing so generously. And so therefore you have a problem, because it seems like Rabbi Shimon is not following the general Shita of Rabbi Akiva. It seems like he's saying that it's not done generously. And you also have a contradiction within the Shita of Rabbi Shimon, and that's what the Gemara continues with over here. V'el kasha, but rather we have a kasha not only on Rav Huna, but we have a general question. Hoel v'yonkin mistei hektish. What was the whole reason that Rabbi Shimon gave in our Mishnah, or we gave for Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah by the Chorav and the Sadan HaShikma? We said that the reason why those are going to be included in the hektish is because otherwise they're taking nutrients from the field of hektish. And so there it seems like the person is makdish generously. So which one is it within Rabbi Shimon? Is the person makdish generously, or is he not makdish generously? And the Rashbam over here explains, V'hainu de kaparach, this is a continuation of the Rashbam in the previous Amud, because the Rashbam is explaining how this is a question not only on Rav Huna, but also a contradiction within Rabbi Shimon. V'yela kasha hoel v'yonkin kamo v'letaimech. The Gemara really saying, according to your reasoning, you think this is only a difficulty on Rav Huna? Adamakshin on Rav Huna, instead of asking on Rav Huna, tikshid Rabbi Shimon ad Rabbi Shimon, we really just have a simple contradiction within Rabbi Shimon. Dahacha shaminon lei, because over here, what do we see over here? Ba'ayin ra makdish, meaning over here in the case of the redemption, in that Brisa brought in the previous summon, you're redeeming just the tree and not the land along with the tree. It sounds like you were just makdish of the tree. It sounds like a person is makdish b'ayin ra. Ule'el ka'amar, and earlier he says hoel v'yonkin. That's the line the Gemara just brought. Hoel v'yonkin mistei hektish. The whole idea, the whole reason why we say that the charav and the sadan hashikma, the reason why they're hektish is because they're taking anyway from the field of hektish. The mashma hakol hektish b'ayin yaf. It sounds like the entire field, he was makdish everything generously. V'lo shayir karka l'charav shalo, and if he would be keeping the carob tree for himself, there'd be no land. Essentially, he's keeping no land for himself. That's why it's problematic. And so there it seems that he's saying it's done b'ayin yafin. So that's the contradiction within Rabbi Shimon. So you don't have to just ask a question on Rav Huna. You have a contradiction here within Rabbi Shimon as well. And so the Gemara continues and answers, Ella rather Rabbi Shimon l'divrayim d'Rabbanan ka'amar lahu. What's actually happening is Rabbi Shimon is actually speaking according to the view of the Rabbanan, but it's not his own view. And he's saying as follows: L'didi, according to me, ki heichi democher b'ayin ra mocher. Just like when a person sells, we say that he's doing it b'ayin ra. He's not doing it generously. Makdish nami b'ayin ra makdish. When a person is makdish, also he's not doing it generously, and that's really the Bryce on the previous Amud. That's why he's redeeming only the tree, and he's redeeming it at value, because he was not makdish the land under the tree in the Bryce on the previous Amud. That actually is the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon actually holds that mocher is b'ayin ra mocher, makdish is b'ayin ra makdish, v'shiyurei mishayer, and so therefore his shiyurei mishayer means to say he's going to leave for himself. He's going to leave the land for himself. He's only being makdish the tree. That's Rabbi Shimon's actual shita. And what Rabbi Shimon is saying in the Mishnah when he's talking about the charav hamurkav and the sadan hashikma, and he's saying that those are hektish, he's saying lididchu, he's saying according to you, meaning according to you that it's done generously, odu li miha, you should admit to me at least, the lo hektish ella charav hamurkav and sadan hashikma. The only things that should be hektish are the charav hamurkav and the sadan hashikma, and nothing more. That's essentially what Rabbi Shimon is arguing to the Rabbanan. We'll see the Rashbam in a moment. V'amri lei, and then they respond to him. They say back to Rabbi Shimon, V'amri lei Rabbanan lo shna. The Rabbanan say back, no, it's not true. We say that other things as well are going to be made hektish. And the Rashbam explains, Hachi garsin el Rabbi Shimon le'divreim de Rabbanan v'shinu Yehu de kameshani de lo tikshi l'may de amar Rav Huna. This also will answer the question that we have in Rav Huna. V'afilu de Rabbi Akiva v'lo tikshi nami de Rabbi Shimon ad Rabbi Shimon. We're now, with this answer, we're not going to have a contradiction within Rabbi Shimon, and we're going to be able to say that Rav Huna actually was talking about according to all shitas. Meaning Rav Huna made this statement that when you sell the land and you keep the two trees for yourself, you keep the two trees, and you're also going to be retaining the land under those two trees, you're not doing so generously. That actually was said even within the sheet of Rabbi Akiva, even according to the one who says that when you sell generously, but in this case where the trees could weaken the land, you actually are retaining some of the land for yourself. That's what we're going to say within Rav Huna, and we're not going to have a question on Rav Huna from Rabbi Shimon, because we're going to have this answer that Rabbi Shimon really, this Rabbi Shimon that you were asking from against Rav Huna was really not Rabbi Shimon's own shita. This was just Rabbi Shimon speaking to the opinion of the Rabbanan. Makdish nami be'ayin ra makdish. Again, the general shita of Rabbi Shimon is that the person does it be'ayin ra. The person does it not generously. Diafilu b'mesh hektish meshayer liatzmo. Even in the field itself, what he is making hektish, he's retaining some for himself. It's not all going to hektish. V'kevan de lo hektish charav v'shikma. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon himself would say, since not included in the hektish is the carob tree and the sycamore tree, lo hektish nami karkat zarachlo. The person was not makdish the field. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's not problematic. The person is makdish just the field. He retains for himself the charav and the shikma, and he retains for himself some of the land also that the charav and the shikma is on. So that's no problem. The tree and a little bit of the land is retained for himself, and the rest of the field is what he's being makdish. Kamo gavi mocher. It's exactly the same as what would happen by a sale. V'shayir ilanos lefanav yesh lo karka. And a person, let's say he's leaving some trees for himself, he will keep for himself some land. Afilu Rabbi Akiva, and that's even according to Rabbi Akiva, as we just said. Kamo shamar Rav Huna, just like Rav Huna says, v'chol shekein l'Rabbanan. And certainly according to the Rabbanan, you're certainly going to retain some of the land along with those trees. Rabbi Shimon agrees with that, and the same would be true according to what Rav Huna is saying. Rav Huna would say it even within the shita of Rabbi Akiva, who generally says it's done generously. But what's Rabbi Shimon really arguing about with the Rabbanan? He's saying as follows: According to you, the islachu ba'ayin yafa yoser midai gabe hektish. The whole discussion in the Mishnah was, the Rabbanan in the Mishnah said that when it comes to a sale, there might be certain things that certainly the seller is keeping for himself. When you sell a field, it doesn't necessarily mean you're selling the pit and the cistern, etc. Certainly that's true by a sale, but the whole point of the Rabbanan in the Mishnah was that's only true by a sale. But when it comes to hektish, all of these other things are included. Even things that are generally excluded from a sale are going to be included by hektish. That's yoser midai. It's extremely generous when it comes to hektish. That's what the Rabbanan said. Afilo hektish bor v'gas, even if it's going to be the bor and the gas, those are also she'enam bechlal sad. Even though they're usually not included in the field, they are included in the hektish. Dai hoyo lachem ilu asisem makdish kimocher l'Rabbi Akiva. So what Rabbi Shimon is saying to the Rabbanan is, you're going too far. You want to say it's generous, fine, but you should only go as far as Rabbi Akiva goes by a sale. L'meimar be'ayin yafa. That's how far you should go generously. You're going too far. You're including too much in the hektish. L'gabe mai demakdish behedya, meaning whatever he said is hektish, that's what you're including. To include things that aren't included within the definition of what the makdish said is going too far. Kagon ha-makdish es hasada. For example, if a person is makdish a field, hikdish kol hakarka kula ba'ayin yafa. You can say, if let's say you're following according to the sheet that is done generously, all of the land is being made hektish. That's being done generously. He's not leaving any land for the carob tree. Nimsa yonik min hektish, and it will come out that it's taking nutrients from hektish v'kadosh, and therefore it too will be kadosh. That I can understand. That's really what Rabbi Shimon is saying to the Rabbanan. I can understand if you're going to say that the carob tree and the sycamore tree are also hektish along with the field. Avol bor v'dos v'shovach, but to include things like the pit and the cistern and the dovecote v'chol hanach dam, all the things we mentioned earlier, the they're not even part of a field. They're not called a field. Lo likdashu, those should certainly not be hektish. Sharei ein daito lahektish yosri mashu mefarsh, because he doesn't want to make hektish more than what he actually said should be hektish. V'amri le Rabbanan lo shanan. The Rabbanan respond, it's not true. We don't make a distinction. Kilomar lo chashu lidvar, meaning the Rabbanan pay no attention to his argument of Rabbi Shimon. Tehaka'amri hektish es kulam, because they say it's all hektish. The medamu le lenosin matana, they say it's the same as giving a gift, where again it's very much done generously. Shenosin no makdish ba'ayin yafa. You're making everything in the field, you're giving it, or you're making it hektish. Since it's a little relevant to the field. And now the Rashbam notes, according to this, you can say Rav Huna is following even the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. There's no question on Rav Huna anymore. Rabbi Shimon also, it's not a question from Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon was just making an argument according to the sheet of the Rabbanan. That essentially is the Gemara's answer over here. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Shimon, well, how can you say the Bryce on the previous oven? Now, this is the Bryce on the previous oven we just mentioned, which said that when you are makdish the trees and then you're redeeming, so you're redeeming only the trees because there was no land that went along with the trees, so you're redeeming the trees at value. You're not following the price that's set by the Torah for land. Rabbi Shimon was not actually mentioned in that Bryce, so the Gemara in the previous oven had said that you have to say that Bryce follows Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemara now is questioning that. How can you say that Bryce follows Rabbi Shimon? Ema Seifa, let's look at the end of that Bryce again. It said at the end of that Bryce, v'lo od, it said not only that, let's say the person first was makdish the trees, and then he goes ahead and he's makdish the land. Now the chiddush in that case is you might say, well, at the time of the redemption now, he's redeeming both the trees and the land, so why should he have to redeem the trees separately at value? He should just follow the price of the Torah on the field. But it said no, since he was makdish the trees separately at the time of the hektish, kishu poda seilanos b'shavyein, when he redeems the trees at value, and then he redeems the field according to the price of the Torah, which is the area that you're going to plant, a zerach chomer sa'orim, a certain amount of seed, it's a certain area, 50 shekel kesef, as we said in the previous Amud, that set price of the Torah. And so the Gemara asks, can you really say that part of the Brisa follows Rabbi Shimon? V'i Rabbi Shimon, but if you're saying it's Rabbi Shimon, leizel basar pidyon, we see in a different place that Rabbi Shimon follows the moment of redemption. And at the moment of redemption, the person is redeeming the trees along with the field. And so why are we saying it's separate? Just because you were makdish it separately, but at the time of the redemption, it's together. And that's what Rabbi Shimon's shita is, v'nifriku agav harayu, therefore you should redeem it together with the land. D'hashaminon leila Rabbi Shimon, da'azil basar pidyon, because we see Rabbi Shimon in a different brisa, he follows the time of the redemption. And where do we see that understand the following. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, from how do we know? Where do we know that if a person buys a field from his father? Now, the issue over here that we're going to be discussing is whether it's considered an ancestral field or is it a purchase field. So here you have a case where the person buys a field from his father. After he buys it from his father, he sanctifies it, he consecrates it. And then his father dies. So it would have been an ancestral field, of course, because now his father died. So how do we know that this field should follow all the rules of an ancestral field, even though at the time he was makdash it was a purchased field, but since later on it became a stei achuzah, it's considered to be a stei achuzah. Talmud lomer v'imes stei miknoso asher lo mistei achuzah. So it says, if let's say it's a purchased field, not an ancestral field, we understand that pasuk to mean sada she'ena ru'uya lios stei achuzah. It's a field that wasn't fit to be an ancestral field. Yotz tazu she'ru'uya lios stei achuzah. In this case, it was fit to be a sada achuzah. Here, it was an inherited field, essentially, or in theory, it could have been an ancestral field. It came to him from his father, and so therefore this does have the halacha of a stei achuzah. So in this situation, you're talking about a case where he bought the field first, he was makdash it, then later his father died. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Again, essentially in this case, that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon are saying it's considered a stei achuzah. Rabbi Meir says, Minayin lelokeach sada me'aviv. From where do we know the following case? The person buys the field from his father. Now, in this particular case, Rabbi Meir reverses the order. Umeis aviv, then his father dies. So now already it sort of is an ancestral field at the time of the hektish, and then he makes it hektish after the father dies. Minayin shetei lefonav k'stei achuzah. From where do we know that that's considered like an ancestral field? Talmud lomer v'imes stei miknoso asher lo mistei achuzah. So it says it's again a purchase field as opposed to an ancestral field. Sada she'ena stei achuzah means to say it's a field that's not a stei achuzah. Yotzazu she stei achuzah. This field really is an ancestral field because his father died before he even made it hektish. And so now the Gemara says, so it seems again that according to Rabbi Meir is only willing to say this second case, it's an ancestral field where it really was inherited before the hektish. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, they go a step further. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon say even in a situation where he was makdash it when it was bought, and then after that it becomes a stei achuzah, the pasuk is including. And so the Gemara now analyzes this. V'ilu Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon. Now whereas Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, heicha demeis aviv, in a case where the father died first, v'yachar kach hekdisha, and then he made it hektish, lo tzrichi kra. They don't even need a pasuk for that. That's obvious that case is ancestral. Ki itzrich kra. When do they need a pasuk? Heicha dehikdisha v'yachar kach meisav. If they need a pasuk in a case where he sanctified it first when it was really just a bought field, and then his father died, so the pasuk comes to say that's also an ancestral field. That's how the Gemara is understanding the machlokas in the Brisa. And so now the Gemara says minolahu. So now from where do we know? From where did they know this? How do they know that the first scenario doesn't even need a pasuk? That's for sure a stei achuzah, and the second scenario is the one the pasuk brings. So imei haikra, if you're going to say they know it from the pasuk, can't be from the pasuk. It's all the same pasuk. Eimol lechid Rabbi Meir hu da'asef. All they have is that one pasuk. The pasuk can be used for what Rabbi Meir's case. Use the pasuk to say that in a case where the father died first and then he was makdash, it's considered an ancestral field. So it can't be that they're learning that idea of Rabbi Meir from the pasuk because there's only one pasuk here. So elalav, rather is it not? They understand the case of Rabbi Meir automatically. Why? Mishum da'azli basar pidyon, because they're following the time of the redemption. Meaning Rabbi Meir's case is as follows. Again, a person buys a field from his father. At that time, it's a bought field. The father then dies, and then you have a situation where after the father dies, he makes it hektish. So they're saying at the time of the pidyon already, it's an ancestral field. We follow that time. It must be they have a general shita, and then they use the pasuk to go even further than that to include their case, again, their situation where it was made hektish before the father died. That's what the Gemara is suggesting. And the Rashbam explains, hamakdish sadim mikne, if somebody's makdish a field that was bought, podeo b'shavyav. So there the halach is it's redeemed at value. That's what it says in the parsha. Avol b'stei achuzah, but if it's an ancestral field, kotzav hakosav zera chomer sa'orim b'chamishim shekel kesef. As we said, there the redemption is set at zera chomer sa'orim is going to be 50 shekel kesef. And so therefore, again, there's a difference in halach. You have to determine whether a field is considered to be a purchased field or is it an ancestral field. And the Rashbam here continues and explains, right now we think as follows. Dikra lo kamar daik v'lo kamar daik. The pasuk, it doesn't imply any more like Rabbi Meir than it does like Rabbi Shimon. It's essentially, it can be read, it can be understood both ways. What's actually happening is the difference in terms of the interpretation of the pasuk is just according to what they hold in general. The Sfira Leila Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon holds the Azlinon Becholek Dejos Basar Shas Pidyon. Must be Rabbi Shimon holds that anytime you're dealing with hektish, you follow the time of redemption. Kekinyan Kol Davar Shein Lochen Es Achefetz Elafi Shavia B'Shas HaMekach. Like anytime you purchase something, you go by what it's worth at that time, and that's the real reason for Rabbi Shimon. Meaning to say, Rabbi Shimon is saying, since you're following the time of the redemption, as long as it's ancestral at the time of the redemption, that's good enough. Rabbi Meir disagrees, and that's why Rabbi Meir says the pasuk only comes to include the first situation. It comes to include a situation where he was makdish it after the father died. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Liolam bi'alma Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Shimon lo azli basar pidyon. Really, in general, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, they do not follow the time of redemption. That's not what's going on over here in this machlokes. V'hacha kra eshkachu v'darsh. Here they found the pasuk and they darshened it, meaning to say there's an extra word, an extra letter in the pasuk, because in kain lichtov kra, because if what Rabbi Meir was saying was correct, the pasuk should have just said v'im es stei miknaso asher lo achuzaso. It could have written if it's a purchase field and not ancestral. Inami stei achuzaso, or just write stei achuzaso without the mem before the word sada. My asher lo mi stei achuzaso. Why does it say that it's not from his ancestral field? It means that she'ena reuya leo stei achuz. It has to be something that's not fit at all to be an ancestral field. Yastazu she'reuya leo stei achuz. As long as something is fit in some fashion to be considered ancestral, that is considered to be ancestral. And the Rashbam explains, Hachi garsinon lichtov kra asher lo stei achuz. Also, my mistei. What's the mem over there? Dahachi mashma kravim as asada mikna she'ena mixas sada achuz. If it's a purchase field that's not even a little bit ancestral. Avol imi sada achuza mixas, but if it's ancestral, even in a certain sense, even a little bit, dahainu hektisha v'yachach meisavev, like let's say he was makdashit and then the father died, to kemat konihu bechlal stei achuza b'shas hektish, that's still considered, even though again it's only a little bit, that's considered to be stei achuza sharei yecholio stei achuza im yamas. It's possible that it'd be a stei achuza if he dies kodem hayovel, before yovel or liolam basar shas hektish. Also, really, we do follow not the time of redemption, we follow the time of hektish, but here we're learning special from the pasuk that the fact that it could be a stei achuza is sufficient. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna says, Chorav hamurkav of esadan hashikma, the grafted carob tree, and the trunk of the sycamore, the developed sycamore tree, Toras ilan olav, v'toras karka olav. That's considered in some ways to be like a tree, and in some ways it has the laws of land. Toras ilan olav, it's considered in some ways like a tree, means as follows, let's say a person, he was makdish, or he bought two trees and also this tree, meaning also a chorav or also a sadan hashikma. So is that considered like three trees or not? The halach is it is considered like three trees. Yesh lo karka, he gets land along with the trees. You might have thought that the chorav hamurkav or the sadan hashikma, it's so chashav that it's like independent, but no, it's considered like a third tree. It's like the person actually bought three trees and the land comes along with it. In that sense, it's like a tree. But on the other hand, Toras karkolav, on the other hand, the chorav and the sadan is considered like land. The lo mizdavin agavara, meaning it's considered to be chashav, independent, important on its own, and therefore if a person sells a field, he retains for himself, as we said in the Mishnah earlier, he retains for himself the chorav hamurkav and the sadan hashikma that does not go along with the sale. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav Huna, and Rav Huna says, Omer sheyesh bo sa'asayim, let's say you have an omer, which is a sheaf of grain, and it's very large, it has two saw. Toras omer olav, on the one hand, it's considered to be like omer, it's considered to be like a sheaf. V'toras gadish olav, but it's also considered to be like a heap. And the Gemara explains, Toras omer olav, on the one hand, it's considered like omer, because the halach is, if a person forgets omer in the field, that's called shichacha, it's left for the poor. But the shnei omrim shichacha, if you have two that you left in the field, two sheaves, that's called shichacha. Shnayim v'hu, but let's say you have two sheaves and also you have this very large sheaf that's two saw, einon shicha, that's considered like three, and it's not shicha. In that sense, it's considered like an omer. Now you've left over three omer, and in such a situation, three omrim in such a situation, again, it's not shicha. But on the other hand, Toras gadish olav, it's also considered like a heap in the following sense, T'tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, omer sheyesh bo sasayim, if you have a very large omer that's two saw, shichacho eino shicha. If it's forgotten, that's not considered shicha, since it's a heap. It's not in the category of shichacha. It's too large, and it is not considered to be left for the poor. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava bar bar Chana, Amar Reish Lakish. Rava bar bar Chana says that Reish Lakish says, Charav hamurkav v'sadan hashikma. When it comes to the Charav hamurkav, again, the carob tree that's grafted, and the sadan hashikma, the sycamore trunk, bonu lemachlokas Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbanan. We have there a machlokas between Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan, and the Rashbam explains, Charav hamurkav v'sadan hashikma, meaning, im kadosh bechlal sada im lav, meaning, are they considered to be consecrated? Are they hektish together with the rest of the field or not? So we're saying here, Banu lemachlokas Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi v'Rabbanan. It's actually machlokas Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan whether they're hektish or not. The Rabbanan kanshi debein yafa makdish kedetanan b'masnisin. According to the Rabbanan, like we said in the Mishnah, they are considered to be part of the hektish because the person does it generously, like we said in the Mishnah. Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi, he follows the sheet of Rabbi Shimon, the ba'ayin ra makdish, that the person is not makdish generously. Ve'afilu charav shiyonek min hasada lo kaddish, even the charav, even the carob tree, which is taking nutrients from the field, he did not make it hektish, the be'ayin ra kol kach hektish as hasada, because he did it so not generously, sheshayin min hasada letzorach, inikas charav shalo, he actually left some of the field for himself in order to give nutrients to his carob tree. He's retaining that for himself. It is not included. That's like we explained earlier. Rabbi Shimon ledivreim the Rabbanan kamerlu. Rabbi Shimon was just responding to the Rabbanan, but again, Rabbi Shimon himself holds that it's bi'ayin ra. Now this statement over here was just something that Reish Lakish heard from his Rebbeim, to Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi, Sfir like Rabbi Shimon, essentially just saying that Rabbi Menachem Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbi Shimon, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph.